Thank you. Well, we got a lot. I listed a whole bunch.
Okay.
So you could introduce us, right?
I think so. I don't think we will. Okay. Test, test. Hey. Woo. Hey, it works.
Yes, in saying hey, Tracy was actually promoting our book, Hey, That's My Song. There'll be a lot of subtle references to that this afternoon.
Hey.
Do you have a copy? Should I hold it up?
Oh, no. But hey, everybody, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to the panel today. And it's Swipe Right, in case you don't know. You might know, some of you. And it's to find the best sync company. What's the best fit for your music? So we're going to introduce our panelists here. We put together this panel really to help you decide where your music fits. So we have...
Should we talk about us first?
Oh, okay, yes. We are composers, songwriters, and producers, and now authors. I'm Tracy Marino, and this is my husband, Vance Marino. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
If you want to see more about our book, it's out in just down the way there. It's called Hey, That's My Song. It's basically to talk about the issues of sync and how to get your music placed multiple times. After years of making a lot of mistakes, that's what we did. So we wrote this for all of you, and we hope you enjoy it, the book. And let's see, what else do we have? We put together this panel to see how it fits with the world of the sync world. Go ahead.
Okay, so we'll start with our panelists. On your far right, let's start, let's see. Be sure to read the amazing bios on the PMC app or website. On the end to your right is Mike Turner. Mike is a music producer and award-winning supervisor, one being honorable mention for best hair. Mike has music supervised films by Judd Apatow, Ice-T, Nick Cassavetes, and commercials for Converse, Petco, Microsoft, Porsche, and TV series on CBS, Netflix, Hulu, Fox Sports, and many more. Representing music supervisors, please welcome Mike Turner.
And next to Mike, we have David Kwan. Yeah, give it up for David Kwan. David is the head of licensing and administration at the Greater Goods Company, and he's also a two-term president of the California Copyright Conference. If you don't know what that is, they have a booth next to our booth, and you can find out more about it. It's a great organization. David knows just about everything regarding music publishing, and I'm not even kidding about that.
I'm glad you added that last part.
Yes,
I don't know.
music publishing. He has worked at BMG, Peer Music, Sony Pictures Entertainment, among many others. His 30 years experience led him to the high-end sync agency, the Greater Goods Company, where he oversees business affairs, licensing, copyright, royalties, you know, the fun stuff. Representing sync licensing companies, please welcome David Kwan.
Next to David is Edwina Travis Chin. She is the VP of Music Strategy and Content at APM Music. Edwina has been with APM for decades. Her words, not mine. Her primary responsibility is...
It's true.
Her primary responsibility is finding the perfect music for clients, but we know she's one of the top brains behind APM, and she helps keep the company running like a well-oiled machine. Representing Production Music Libraries, please welcome Edwina Travis Chin.
And last, but certainly not least, we have the lovely and multi-talented fellow author, Michael Ames. And Michael is president of Penn Music Group, and he comes to a lot of networking events, so you'll see him around. He has been involved with approximately 1 million professional music organizations. including the MLC, the NMPA, SONA, and the AIMP. And if you don't know what any of those words are and acronyms, ask him, or go out to the lobby and ask, or read our book. And you can buy one of Michael's books. Somehow he finds the time to represent and license iconic songs by artists such as Jimi Hendrix, Chicago, Roy Orbison, and many others. Representing independent music publishers, please welcome Michael Ames.
Okay, so before we get started, we'd like to begin by taking a quick poll of the audience so we know who's here. Let's see, how many of you have had your music directly placed by a music supervisor? Please raise your hands.
Okay,
that's
and
pretty
for
good,
the
okay.
people watching online, that's about 12 people, maybe 15?
And how many of you have had music signed and placed with a production music library?
Most people, okay, about
that would be the clear winner.
3/4, okay.
Signed and placed with a sync licensing company or agent.
Okay, we have about 12 people.
And signed and placed with an independent music publisher.
Oh, about 6 people.
You get to work there, Michael.
Yeah, got to get more people.
Guess the panels become easier for me.
And then also, how many of you are artists?
Okay, about a third of the room.
And how many of you write songs?
About half. Okay,
How many of
half
you
the-
write instrumentals?
About
Okay.
half. Oh, most people. Okay.
Okay. How many of you have arms that are tired?
Awesome. We want to actually start with Mike Turner, our music supervisor representative here. Approximately what percentage of the time does a music supervisor work directly with an artist or songwriter?
Well, I guess it sort of depends on what you mean by work with them. I would say on every project, I interact with our composer to some degree. Sometimes it's just, comes down to figuring out whether this is going to be a your job thing or a my job thing, and then we kind of go into our separate corners and figure it out. So that's there's definitely communication there. I would say maybe. And this isn't exactly a percentage, but maybe between 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 times, it ends up falling in my lap to find and hire the composer on a project. I mean, often, I would say more often than not, the director or showrunner already has somebody they want to use. But even in those situations, sometimes I will often actually be involved in sort of helping negotiate their agreement on behalf of the production, if that's something that the producers aren't like super, comfortable with, if they don't have a lot of experience, maybe I'll be sort of be in between the composer and the production, or deal, hammer the deals out with their agent, that kind of thing. I don't know if that answers the question.
What we're looking for, in addition to that, is how often does a music supervisor license a piece of existing music directly from an artist?
Like they pitch it to you.
Okay. So I totally misunderstood that.
No, that's good too.
I certainly have, but I try not to some degree, because it's just easier and more efficient for me to go to a company that represents songs as opposed to trying to think of one artist in a sea of a bazillion artists and go see if they have what I might need. But that said, I mean, I know a lot of musicians and I have a lot of friends who are artists. So if I can, if they have something that I need and I can help them out, then I would love to do that. But it has to be one of those things where I just think like, oh gosh, so and so has a song like this that might work, and I would reach out to them. But usually I'm going to solicit from companies that are going to pitch me, a variety of things, and that's just, I think, more efficient for everyone, even the artists, really. Yeah.
Those are called preferred vendors, or your.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get like fancy about it, but you develop relationships with people, at catalogs, at sync companies, at publishers, at labels, and you like them, but you also like what they have. And, if you have a good experience working with them and finding success with that stuff, then you go back to them. Because everything in this business is so, difficult, you know, that you try to like streamline things where possible, and it's like if something it works, you want to repeat that, you know. So I think that's usually why people kind of go back to the same sources. Yeah.
So how do you decide if you're going to go with a independent music publisher or a music library or a sync agency? How is that decision made?
I mean, when it comes to what they have creatively, as the end user to some degree, it's sort of irrelevant for me. If they have what I need, like I don't, and I can license it from them legally, I guess it doesn't really matter whether they're a publisher or a sync agent or a record label. Like you know, it just you cross paths and you work with so many different entities across that whole spectrum as a music supervisor, and I've been doing it for about 13 years. That you end up, you know, starting to identify people's strengths. Like I know that if I really need, you know, vintage one-stop cues from like the 1960s that sound like, you know, Motown, Stax stuff, there's probably 3 companies that are on the top of my brain that I'm going to go right out to. Fervor Records in Phoenix, you know, the Numero Group under Secretly Canadian, I don't know, maybe Light in the Attic because they have a lot of one-stops even as a reissue. Like those places like always have stuff, and if I can't find it with them, then maybe I'll widen the circle. But just, you know, even in answering that question, I know that like, oh, they're going to have doo-wop from the 60s that I can get for, you know, $5,000 all in for this, you know, $10 million indie film, you know, and because I've licensed it from them before. So, and then as I discover new sources for stuff like that, I'm going to keep it in my brain as much as possible, because the vintage one-stops in particular are, you know, sort of gold in this business because there's only so many.
Exactly. Oh, great answer. Did you write that down, everybody? Get those 3 companies. We're going to move on to the sync companies, the catalog representatives. So you have a question?
Yes, this is the business portion. So, and this is an important part for everybody here in the room to understand what most of the main focus of this panel is, so that you all understand the different models that exist and what the deal terms tend to be, so you can make more informed decisions. And realizing that within each category, you know, there are production music libraries, they have different kinds of deals. Some are work for hire, some are not. And then it will vary. So what we're going to ask is about, are your terms exclusive, non-exclusive, work for hire, and do you have advances? So let's start with Michael Ames.
The lovely Michael Ames? No. Sorry. That's what Tracy said earlier. I've never been called that before.
You just got demoted.
I'm still adjusting that to that. I've never had that descriptor. Gosh. All right. Well, I guess what I think I might do, since you're pointing to me first, where I'm going to maybe sort of set the stage to maybe be slightly different as you guys take this next. So, you know, I am an independent music publisher, and I would say therefore I am not a music library. I don't deal in production music. I have licensed music on occasion in a style that one would maybe attribute more towards a production music, you know, sort of world, a blanket license of all sort of instrumentals. But, and what's kind of interesting, I guess, but it's relevant, I think, to answer this question is, you know, I started my company in 1994, and for those of you who have been around the production music space, there were, I'd say probably about 10 independent companies who all kind of did the same sort of thing. If you remember Mark Ferrari and Master Source, Barbara Jordan and Heavy Hitters Music, there's Position Music that they started around the same time. And, you know, I came from the world where she mentioned Jimi Hendrix. I don't currently have Jimi Hendrix, but I worked at a place before I started Penn that repped Jimi Hendrix. So what was great for me with that catalog in particular was fantastic of not only I could get anyone on the phone, but the amount of money that I could get for one individual license because it's Jimi Hendrix is pretty amazing. So when I started my own company, I kind of came from that perspective and wanted to keep that ability to be able to do the known songs and the known catalogs, and I still do that. But at the same time, we repped independent artists that very specifically we wanted to make sure we're 100% all in so that we could represent 100% of the publishing and 100% of the master. That's what all these other companies were doing, but they were also doing it very deliberately in sort of a music library lane, which I didn't really want to do. And we all sort of came up across like the same networks who then, there's no one here from a network, so I'm not going to say anything bad, but networks like to put you in a box, put you in a lane. Oh, you have X, and we are only going to license Y from you for the Z price. And I didn't really want to get into that whole thing because at the time, I'm not saying this is now, but like, Master Source, Heavy Hitters, and others were like, oh, they would license tons of stuff for $600 a pop, as a whole all-in fee. But their deals where they had all the publishing, they would make all their money on the back end, whereas I'd rather license one independent artist for like $3,000, and I'm probably getting in the end the same money on the upfront as they're getting of 5 individual licenses at $600 a pop. But our economics then diverge wildly on the back end because they're getting 100% of the publishing share on the performance end, and I, as the person who's administering that independent artist, I'm collecting their publishing that I don't really own. I usually administer, and I'm commissioning it, and they can leave at any time and all of this. So I set that up as a way partially for the others, but to hit your bullet points, we will only do exclusive. We won't do non-exclusive. Because the Danish can. Thank you very much. I got a clap. But I mean, and this may come up in more detail, but I think over the years, music supervisors much prefer exclusive versus non-exclusive. They know you are the one place that they can get this full song or a share of a song. Wait, what were the other? Okay, work for hire. No, I haven't done work for hire things, though. The clients we represent, I try to get them work for hire jobs. And I have taken some of our clients and brokered deals with libraries that would do work for hire deals for them, or we've had a lot of our guys who are also composers or maybe get hired to do songs for like a Disney or a Mattel or whomever. They need work for hire, and that's just a thing where I'll rep it. I don't own anything. I just commission it because I got it. And then advances. I am, as I sit here currently, a non-funded independent music publisher, the key word being non-funded, which means therefore I don't typically pay advances to anybody. Have I on occasion? Yes, but there's usually a very specific, business instance where I know I'm going to be sort of, out the money for X period of time because I know what the flow is, or I know what's in the pipeline kind of thing, so I'm not out that risk for too long. We're separately getting into a situation where we might get access to some funding, so in that case, ask me in a year if you do this again and I'm back, and I might have a slightly different answer, but did that answer your things? Because I feel like I should shut up now and pass it on.
So
Yes,
Edwina.
Next.
Edwina with APM, which represents several different catalogs and with different deals.
How many thousands?
So they have different
Millions.
deals. Can you kind of throw one down the middle of the plate so we can kind of catch what typically happens?
Well, APM is different than a lot of other music libraries in that we don't actually produce and own our own content for the most part. We actually act as the marketing and licensing agent for a number of different libraries, international libraries, most of them from Europe, a few in the United States, and other areas of the world. So for us, when you talk about the agreements between a library and a composer, it's really dependent upon that particular library. Now, one of the things that makes APM, within a certain type of library, there are libraries who basically just buy out their composers. Here's your flat fee, see you later, that sort of a thing. That's not the model that APM, adheres to. We really I certainly firmly believe that, composers are entitled to participate in the revenue that their music generates. So with a company like APM, we make sure that the composers who write for the libraries that we represent get paid. There are cue sheets. You're entitled to 100% of your performance, and then the publisher's part of the performance gets split between the original publisher and APM, who's acting as the sub-publisher. So that's if you're talking about how does the payment part of it work, That's our business model at APM. I don't know if that's answering the question you're
That's
asking.
great.
Okay.
Thank you. And David?
And all the extras come to me, of course, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so a sync agency basically is a company that they pitch your music for sync, film, television, advertising, and that's the only thing they do. They do not take any of your back end. They don't take ownership of your song. They only share in sync income. So what they do is that they sign an agreement with you for a certain amount of years, and they pitch, and whatever comes in, they share the revenue with. So we do we do exclusives only because I guess Mike can talk about why exclusive and non-exclusive is a mess, but we do exclusives only. Yeah, we'll give you the hard one. We only do exclusives. We do not pay advances because our terms are a lot shorter than the terms are for publishers. Our terms usually start at anywhere between two to 3 years with maybe a renewal of 1 year. So if we gave you an advance, we only have 2 years to make that back. And as anyone here on stage knows, it takes at least a year to get anything in the pipeline. So for us to recoup an advance, it would be very, very risky. So we don't give advances. And then we don't do work for hires either. We just take whatever you already have, and then we pitch it.
You never take the ownership of the copyright then?
That is correct.
Okay.
We don't take ownership at all.
And then how about APM?
Well,
libraries?
APM doesn't take the ownership of the copyright. That's the library that we represent. And one thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about the writers getting 100% of their performance, that's true. When it comes to the synchronization, what happens is the writer, whatever the agreement is that the writer has with the original library, that's where the splits, come in. And I believe most of our libraries are all, 50-50 between the original publishing library and the composer. APM gets their share off of the publisher's share of sync. And then whatever's left that goes to the library, they then split with their composer, and that's on the sync side.
Now, maybe I'm going to throw a quasi little wrench into this, but I'm going to throw in another perspective, is that even though we have on occasion do the sync rep, we don't typically. We're usually entering into admin deals with everyone. So that's exclusive admin deals. So anything that's in your world, we're involved in, right? And we make a distinction in those admin deals on whether we generated the income or we didn't. We have a lower commission when we didn't generate it. We have a higher commission if we did. And we have to prove that we did. But where I'm throwing this out there is what we do have as part of our admin deals is that if we can take a song that had never been released before, so like literally sitting on the shelf, and if we can, and our typical commission is 25% when we generate something, it's not a secret, I'm happy to share it, that if we hit a certain threshold of income that we can generate on a song that had zero life and we breathe the life into it, we want, when we hit that threshold, to have our 25% commission convert into a 50% co-publisher share. The split of income stays the same, right? We'd still be only getting 25% of the overall income because the writers would still be getting 100% of their writer's share and half of the publisher's share, so there's that 75%. It's just we feel at that point, if we're the sole ones that breathe the life into this copyright, when we hit that threshold, we feel that we should become permanent partners in that song at that point in recognition of what we brought to it. And you can still go and take your other half somewhere else if you want, if you were to do another deal, but at least, we become a permanent partner in the song as that thanks or recognition for having breathed the life into it.
So, Mike, I think David kind of served it up there for you.
Mike and David will be fighting in the hall afterwards.
No, I mean, I have heard that there are some networks that will not use music from non-exclusive catalogs. What has your experience been with that, as far as the deal terms of the catalog representation actually affecting the marketability of the catalog?
Yeah. Yes. There are some networks that won't license from licensors that are pitching music non-exclusively. I don't know what all of them are. Some do and some don't. I think CBS won't. And NBC won't. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of two minds about the exclusive versus non-exclusive thing. I mean, in a frictionless universe, like I wish everything was exclusive. It would be cleaner for everyone. It's cleaner on a copyright scenario. It's cleaner for pitching. It can potentially uncomplicate things for music supervisors. But I also get that, you know, in the current, you know, reality where, you know, sync is very important and, you know, people have to start somewhere. It's difficult to get signed to, you know, an exclusive deal. I mean, getting an exclusive sync representation isn't necessarily any easier than, you know, getting signed to a great record label deal, you know, or a great publishing deal. So if that's not possible for you right now because, you know, that's not where your career is at musically, I totally understand from the artist perspective why they would be like, well, this company said they'll pitch me on a non-exclusive basis and there's a lower bar for entry. And so, you know, why wouldn't you do that? And I wouldn't want to, like, you know, gatekeep artists from getting their music out there. But from a licensor standpoint, and I'm in the middle of that, so I don't have any personal liability on it, but if I'm, you know, the network or a movie producer, there is this kind of, like, issue of, you know, when you sign a license saying we represent, you know, you sign the warranties and indemnities saying that, like, we, you know, are the legal representative of this copyright, that is not... That calls that into question, kind of, you know, as to whether that's real if it's non-exclusive. Because you may be right now at this moment, but 5 years from now, you know, if something gets audited and you're not, then, like, where does the responsibility lie? And so that can kind of cause a legal issue for the license holder after they've done a contract, you know, and these things are out in the world for, you know, perpetuity, and you sign a perpetuity agreement, you know.
Does the exclusivity or non-exclusivity have an effect on the license fee?
No, that's not. I don't think that's what, you know, music is valued essentially when it comes to sync based on popularity. I mean, it's a popularity contest. That's really it. It's like, how many people have ever heard of this song? The more of them there are, the more expensive it is. Like, you know, and then it's just like, what'll you accept, you know? So if it's, you know, famous songs are really expensive, not famous songs are less than expensive, and it just kind of goes down from there. And then if somebody says, hey, will you take $5,000 for this? You can say yes or no, and then, you know, the less famous a song is, the easier it is to replace, you know? So that sort of power dynamic kind of goes back and forth. Like, you know, if I really, really need, you know, Time of My Life from the Dirty Dancing movie, which I licensed from Michael a couple years ago, like, if we really need that song, there's only one place to get that song. You know, it's a lot harder to replace. So, I mean, he can drive a hard bargain if he wants to. It'd be like $1 million. And
he does.
If we really want it, we're going to have to pay that, you know?
What have you heard?
Yeah, and we paid a lot of money for it. But, you know, if it's not that, if it's like, well, we need an indie song in the, you know, bar in the background of this scene, and I'm like, I like this one, and the songwriter goes, well, give me $10,000, and I would just be like, no, not for this. I'll find something else. You know, it's fine. But you can say that.
Yeah, I mean, if just very quickly, because at least I want to explain my perspective that I think is why I don't do non-exclusive. So years and years ago, I started to rep a guy who I'm friends with, and of course I wanted to help him, and I didn't do it exclusive at the time. It was non-exclusive. However, he also didn't tell me that he'd given the same music to somebody else non-exclusively. So I pitched it to a good friend of mine who was a supervisor. He loved it. He licensed it. And then it aired on a Friday night, and he called me on Monday morning. He's like, hey, listen, man, like, so-and-so called me up screaming at me this morning because he was like, you know, I saw the episode that aired on Friday night. Why the hell didn't license the song from me? And the supervisor was like, well, I licensed it from Ames. And, you know, and thankfully my relationship was solid enough with that supervisor where I then, of course, had to call my client and be like, maybe it would have been relevant for you to tell me that someone else was pitching. But here's the irony, is that the other guy had it non-exclusively. So he had no right to call the supervisor and yell at them. But it put me in an awkward position with someone that if I did not have the solid enough of a relationship that I had with him, he might not use my music again. And the other perspective that I want to throw out there that I have heard from other supervisors, and I haven't heard it from Mike, so he may disagree, is that, I think when an artist puts their songs with multiple places, and whether you've put the same song with multiple non-exclusive places, or you say give one set of songs to one place, another set of songs to another place, so you're not technically non-exclusive on a song basis, but you're non-exclusive as an artist, and a supervisor starts to see you in from multiple places being pitched, I personally think it dilutes your brand as an artist. And I think that's gonna sort of send the message, I don't know how much of a serious artist this is. I think they're hustling for sync, and I can probably get things for a cheaper price. And whatever the situation is, whenever a supervisor if it's changed now in the digital world, but my office is right next to a guy who does TV all the time. We moved in next to each other 12 years ago. And literally, if you've ever been to the post office, have you ever seen those funky plastic bins that are at the post office that carry all the packages? He literally had an intern who brought one full overflowing plastic bin back to the office every day. So they were getting hundreds of CDs, hundreds of packages. They had to, put them, rip them in, log them in. It's an unbelievable amount of music that these guys have to deal with. And no matter the situation, now I'm going to use Mike. If Mike, for whatever reason, has a negative experience in his head, even if he doesn't remember the circumstances, and sees an artist's name years later, he might think twice about using that artist because I think I had a problem last time. I'd rather go over here and use something else. So I just think all of you as artists need to be careful with your strategy on where you put things.
I'm going to jump on this because there's a little bit different perspective on this from the library standpoint. Any of you who have written for libraries, you know that you're most likely writing for more than one library. I mean, we certainly have a number of composers who write for multiple libraries that we represent. For a library such as APM, making sure that we do have exclusivity or that the library who has signed that composer up has exclusivity is one of the things that is kind of a hallmark of production music, because one of the goals of production music is to make that whole usage and licensing process as frictionless as possible for the end user, the person who's creating the programming or whatever it is that they're doing. Which is why, you always hear library referred to as one stop. We represent both the publishing and the master side of things. So you can imagine the difficulties and the confusion that can ensue if you got, different people who are saying, well, I have this, or the idea that you might get totally, I've heard of people who, try to go to different libraries, people who are clearing. If they know that it's not exclusive, they'll go and say, well, maybe I can get a better deal from this other company. Where they're pitting companies against each other, which is it gets really messy.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Which I think it's not something, I don't know how often that happens, but it definitely could happen. And it's one of those things where, if three companies is repping the same song, do I just price shop them and just be like, well, these guys said they'd do it for $500. You gonna give it to me for $300? And then who wants it more? I mean, that gets kind of gross. I will say that generally the folks or the music that is spread that thin that's getting repped by multiple places, it's usually not stuff that I'm excited enough about that I would really care to do that. I mean, but it does come up. I get pitched the same songs from a few different places.
And there's the issue of if you think about it, when you start setting up that situation where somebody is coming to clear that piece of music, not because it's a good piece of music, but because they're trying to drive a price point, really what you're doing is you're driving down the overall value of your music. That's something that I know that the PMA has been fighting for years, is to try to maintain the validity and the respect that production music, deserves. That, we're not, quote unquote, oh yeah, it's that canned music stuff. I mean, that's a perception that library music has been fighting for years and years and years. So there's that aspect of it, certainly, that I wanted to address. So yeah, for APM, if you're writing for one of our libraries, that piece is exclusive, but some libraries sort of expect that if you're writing for their library, you're only writing for their library, but that's not necessarily the case with a lot of libraries. You know, we want to promote the ability of composers to exercise their craft. So, you know, if you are able to write for more than one library, as long as it's exclusive to that library and it's good music, you know, we're all for it.
Can I throw one thing else out
Sure,
there? Or are you
go
gonna
ahead,
hate
Michael.
me?
No.
Well, I don't want you to
We will
take the
never hate
lovely
you.
descriptor away. I'm still basking
You'll
in the
always
glow.
be lovely.
Well, so I just want to throw this out there. That we don't want to get too far off the topic, and these guys have spent a lot of time planning with
We've
lots
got
of questions.
40 more pages to cover.
But I want to throw this out there on the subject of this non-exclusive, which then ventures into the world of retitling, right? Where the company that is non-exclusive will change the title, and the publishing will change, but the writers will stay the same. I just throw this out there as a rhetorical thing for you to think about. The technology is already here and will be developed further as we go along, where things are being identified by its sound waveform. So if the PROs who are always wanting to try to leverage technology to help them do their job better, if your work that has the exact identical waveform is with 3 different libraries and they all have the same writers but all 3 different publishers, but you all have the same waveform and the PRO has technology that picks up a use of your waveform, how the hell do they know who they're going to pay? They have 3 choices and they have no indicator or way to know where they need to pay the money. It's called a nightmare. So.
And the black box.
Yeah, it just won't get paid
So
to anyone.
let's move on from the deal terms.
I knew you'd say, all right, time to move on.
That's obviously that's a very important thing, and you need to understand that before you decide which kind of company and which company within that model you're going to sign with. But there are other concerns as well, like marketing. There are some catalogs where it's just one person, one office, in one little town, and maybe they can get a lot of traction that way. But obviously, there are other companies where the model is they've got sub-publishers all over the world. So for each of you, and again, you can answer based on your own individual company or others in your category. How far is your company's distribution and reach globally, outside the U.S.? David.
I'm not going first.
Okay, then I'll go first.
Please.
We're a very tiny company. We have 6 employees, and I want to say about 3,000 songs, so we're tiny. And we are North American based. The founder's from Canada, and so a lot of our work comes in from North America, and that's where our bread and butter is. We specialize in advertising. We just landed some major deals with Absolute and Apple, and we are very successful here domestically and in North America.
Is that common for most sync agencies to just be in the U.S.?
I think so. What's your experience with the sync? Because realize that I come from the independent publishing world. This is my first gig as a sync agent person. So
And he was a music supervisor, too.
There's
That's-
definitely sync companies overseas, but I think, you know, as a music supervisor working on mostly American media, I tend to mostly work with U.S.-based companies, but there's definitely a few in like Australia and the U.K. that I will work with too. But often they have partners in the U.S. that pitch their stuff here for them because of the relationship stuff.
I
so,
mean,
yeah.
I mean, certainly with APM, any library that APM represents, we are only allowed to issue licenses for use if the production has originated in either the U.S. or Canada.
And I mean, and publishers are like that a lot, in particular because of the flow of like royalties and rights situation. With sync, just a sync only company, it probably matters less. But I think they tend to stick to their home turf more, just because of relationships.
Yeah. Well, with us again, because of the various libraries that we represent, some of the libraries we represent already have agents in every single country. I mean, APM is co-owned by Universal Music and Sony Music, so it's not like Sony has to go and, oh, we need somebody to represent our library, and wherever, you know, they've already got their agents set up. We happen to be their agent for U.S. and Canada. So it really depends, you know. Some of the libraries we represent do have multiple different agents in different countries. Others, you know, the really large corporations, they've already got their network set up.
And
So
by the
it
way,
really
Mike
depends.
Turner is a global brand.
Universal.
It's Mike Turner Universal Enterprises worldwide.
Well, you know, he has that network named after him. Right, you know.
Uncle Ted.
Turner
That's why I go
Broadcast.
to for funding. If I come up short, I can just go call up Uncle Ted.
And for us, in-house, we have 2 full-time people who pitch for Sync. I'd say we're 2.5 or 2 1/3, and I would include myself, but I don't have that much time to do it as much as I used to. But where we're a little bit different, and I'm going to address the international, is that we've banded up with a group of other fellow independents, some of whom are publishers, some of whom are sync agents, and we share briefs with each other. So, you know, supervisors don't always send their needs to the same group of people every time, because as Mike said earlier, when I need vintage 1960s, he goes to, you know, the 3 that he mentioned. Or whatever else, he may have experience where I need this genre, I'm going to go to these companies. But from the music rights holder perspective, as much as it makes total sense that Mike is doing that, that's frustrating to me because you're assuming that I don't have it.
I know.
It's just that you haven't licensed it from me before. So we have felt with our group that with these 4 or 5 companies, and we all share briefs, someone might get a brief that we wouldn't, and when they need music that we have, we'll give it to them. They run with it. If something happens, we just split the commission.
That's a great idea, actually.
And then internationally, we have sub-publishers. And we do, some sub-publishers are more active than others in sync, but the thing that I think is kind of fascinating of the way the world works now is, you know, you can tell from the hair I'm older, right? So I'm 55. When I started this, the sync market out overseas was kind of still very segmented by territory. But as the years have gone on, borders have totally dissolved and erased. So, you know, a music supervisor in the UK could be working with a Dutch brand that, you know, is whatever, so over here. So we're finding it, I have now made sync non-exclusive with our sub-publishers because we're getting more things directly. And if I get it directly, I like them. But if I get it directly, why should I share any money with them? Or, you know, there now is a common thing where you have agents, like you were saying here. Some places will just have agents in different territories of the world that aren't acting as a sub-publisher, but they're just bringing you local briefs that you might not have heard of otherwise, and then you run it through them, and they take their cut and send it to you.
We know that sub-publishers used to go to Las Vegas for the NAB show over the years, but now they're coming here, which is great, to the PMC. Can you just, maybe Edwina, can you just basically explain what a sub-publisher is for people who don't know? Because we hear that term all the time.
So you have your basic original copyright owner, and they won't necessarily have a presence every place. So what they will do is they will reach an agreement with another entity who will represent their publishing interests on an exclusive basis for a particular territory. So for instance, you know, with all the libraries that we represent, they're the original publisher. For the territory of the US and Canada, APM has the exclusive right to, you know, issue quotes, handle the licensing, you know, collect revenues, do all that sort of stuff on their behalf. Basically, you're working on behalf of that original publisher in whatever territory you have the right, you know, you've been granted the right to take care of those things.
Great, thank you. We also wanted to ask you more on the creative side. How do you find composers? And do you sign composers, artists, songwriters? What is your signing?
For APM?
Edwina?
Yeah, well, because, again, as I said, APM is the licensing and marketing agent for the library. So we, as such, don't directly we don't directly work with the composers. But what we do is we have libraries who are open to accepting submissions, and what I will, you know, generally do is say, listen, here are the libraries that are open. Not all of them are. Some of them are. Some of them aren't. Here are the libraries that are open to submissions, and my recommendation is always go onto our website, become familiar with those libraries that are open to submissions, because let's face it, if you are a classical composer, you shouldn't be contacting one of our hip-hop libraries. You know, it just doesn't. I mean, you could, but might not be the best, you know, best fit. So, you know, making sure, and this same thing with libraries. Generally speaking, we do take on new libraries, but under very limited circumstances at this point in time because we are so large already. But we don't actively go out and look for anything at this point in time. And, you know, it's different. Some libraries do actively solicit, you know, new talent and everything. What we do, because we don't own the content, we're usually referring people on to the libraries that we're sub-publishers for.
So how does Greater Goods find artists?
They find us. So, we stay lean and mean, and we like signing artists that have a story behind them, meaning that they are already touring, they are already getting some type of airplay. Because realize that we play a small component in their overall career. We just place music and film and television. That's all we do. So we have to make sure that if we're going to partner up together, that they're doing their part in promoting their careers, so that way when we approach the music supervisors, we have a compelling story to tell. So we mostly sign artists. We like to keep, again, that catalog lean, because we want to make sure that every client feels that they're represented, because when you get too big, especially for the size of our company, then they're not going to get the attention that they deserve. So we take referrals from some of our other colleagues. Some people find us, but we really like people who do their homework on our company and they feel that they're a fit. We would more than gladly hear their submission.
So Mike, I would imagine you're in the same boat. You don't look for them, they find you.
I put cookies and milk out near the fireplace every night, and when I wake up, my place is full of composers. Yeah, gotta get the hose. Yeah, I mean, like you can open a window and whisper in Los Angeles for composers. Yeah, and I get like, you know, anywhere between 50 and 100 emails a day from, you know, every sync company and music library and record label and music publisher in the world with their new releases and stuff. So, and yeah, I'd like to also, but you know, to David's point about how they, you know, source music, it just kind of reminded me of something that I've said before about specifically in the artist model, which is very different. Like what they rep at Greater Goods is very different from, you know, like a library model of like production music is just like a different business model, right? So, but as an artist, if you're, you know, trying to get, you know, if you're an artist brand and you're a performer and you want to get your songs into film and TV, and sync being, you know, can be a critical part of an artist's career, but what I always tell them is that the rest of your music career is the key to syncs. It's not syncs that's the key to your music career. So that is what makes your music more valuable in film and television, which is why they look for artists that, you know, do have a story, that are getting played on, you know, KCRW and, you know, doing small stages at Coachella, or like, you know, there is that like indie vein where it's like, it's popping. You're not a household name, but like you're going places, and that just only increases the value of your songs in sync, you know, because then they can like arguably hold a line when I go, hey, do you guys will you take $5,000 for this, you know, Saint Panther song or whatever? And they're like, no, 10. And I'll be like, okay, because we really like that, and that's, you know, it's not, she's not Lady Gaga, but it's like, it's cool and it matters, you know. It's not just a, you know, swappable production track that I'll be like, oh, go to Megatrax and get something similar, you know.
How about pen music?
Okay. There's so much music out there. I think
Really? Seriously?
I was just being, you know, anyway.
He's always sarcastic.
The majority of the things that we get and that we represent have pretty much only come through referral. The best referrals are our own clients, because then they're already happy and they're working with somebody else and will refer somebody. I mean, there is a mechanism on our website where we can submit. I had been in enough directories years ago where we said accept unsolicited submissions. There are a bunch of legal reasons why a bunch of companies don't do that, but honestly, it's just the amount of music is just utterly overwhelming. So you need to take the filter, and the best filter that's been effective for us is the referrals, either from the clients or, you know, a manager that you work with, or a lawyer, or someone that they're just like, hey, I think you need to hear this and check it out. But much like David, we are on purpose not trying to have artists who occupy more than 5 artists that occupy the same lane. Because, you know, when Mike needs something, he's going to 20 plus companies to look for music, and we're each going to probably pitch 2 or 3 of our artists for that lane that he's asking for. So do the math. If he went to 20 companies and we each pitch 3, he's listening to 60 artists. Only one of those companies is going to get the use. All the rest of us are going to hear a no. And then the more artists we have that don't get synced, not that their music isn't good. It's just that I'm getting tired of having the conversation of, hi, can we meet? Because we're not getting syncs, and I think we should sit down and talk about it. Yeah. And it's like, no, the competition is ridiculous. And it just, you know, Mike just happened to click on the right thing at the right time. And maybe we all sent him something that was perfect, but he listened to somebody else's first and it fit exactly what he needed and he was done.
Yeah, sometimes it is just the path of least resistance. It's like, this is the one, like this one, you know, I pitched and the director liked it right away. And it's like, great, done, we're not looking anymore. But the next one might have been just as good or better, but he likes this one. So I'm not like, even if I have one that I like more, like, oh, you like that one? And we can get it? Great, I'm moving on. Like, it's just... I don't get paid more the longer that I'm on a project. I get paid less, actually, which is partly why music supervisors are trying to unionize. Once we have a union, and then I'm just getting paid for my time, then I'm gonna, like, you know, cause all kinds of problems. Be like, maybe you should spend more time on the music, you guys. But also, to your point, I send referrals to music, like licensing companies and publishers occasionally. If I know of an artist who's totally independent, who I think is great, and just seems like they would fit somebody's catalog. I've done that a bunch of times, actually. I've reached out to a certain company and been like, hey, you know, so you should check out so-and-so. I think they're cool, and it just seems like your sync company would be a good fit for them. Would you take a listen to them, you know? And sometimes they've gotten deals that way, but I'll do that every now and then just because, like, it mentally make a connection. Be like, man, Greater Goods, you guys are really great with, like, very current, cutting-edge indie hip-hop. I love that about your catalog. So if somebody, like, you know, fell in my lap and I was like, man, this seems like it's a Greater Goods artist. Like, I might send him to Mike Jansen, you know.
Oh, that's cool. How long does it take you to hit the play and start listening and go, okay, this doesn't work? I mean, we've seen it like 5 seconds, seriously.
It can be. I mean, because it's a checklist, kind of like a mental checklist. So sometimes you just right away, you're like, oh, no, instantly I know that's not going to work. But sometimes you're like, ooh, this is close. I like it. Where's it going? Like, you know, skip around. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of things that are almost. Sometimes you hear it and you're like, this is like a winner for sure. I mean, it's always ultimately the director or the showrunner's decision, but what I send them are the ones that I'm either like, I love this for this, and there may be 3 to 5 that I love for that, or like, I like this a lot, and I think that the director might like it. And sometimes it's a question of getting into their heads and readjusting my desires for the scene and being like, the director has this kind of taste, and this isn't really my cup of tea, but I think he's going to like it for this scene, you know?
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Do we have time for questions? Any questions out there so far? No? You guys
Well,
are
actually, then,
quiet.
there is one. Okay, I think this gentleman over here raised his hand first.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any mics back.
Can you please stand? That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question as far as like pricing is concerned. Like, if you're, you know, a library and you're representing these artists, and like, you know, there could be something like a Mark Petrie song for Audio Machine that goes for like 80 grand for War of the Planet of the Apes or something, or you're talking about pushing back on, you know, $1,000. So if you're representing these people, how do you kind of know whatever that algorithm is, that secret sauce of how much you can give your artists versus you don't want to scare them off?
So the question has to do with pricing. How do they arrive at prices, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, so, yeah. it's a bit.
The popularity contest again.
It is kind of. I mean, there's some things that are a bit more standardized than others. Like, you know, there's the sort of generally agreed upon like library rates that are anywhere from, you know, at the low end probably $500 to like maybe at the high end like $1,200, $1,500. Like, I think what the APM needle
You haven't
drop
been talking
rate.
to us then.
I mean, you guys are around 1,200, right? Like for like drop.
Well, you know,
depends on what it is.
the thing was, a library will have some sort of a rate schedule based on the type of production, what the distribution is going to be, all that sort of thing. You know, with somebody like David or somebody like Michael, they're getting, you know, direct requests for their music, where there's a negotiation process involved.
Yeah.
With the library, we're dealing with having a set rate schedule based on the type of usage. Because honestly, the way that the libraries work, there are many times when we are not directly interacting with the end user. We have a website. We have clients who are signed up for that website. They know that it's their responsibility to report any usage. There's no negotiation involved. It's not a transactional kind of experience. Even at the point at which we've got, the music directors at our company pitching songs, again, it's not as if we're, you've discovered a piece, you come to us and say, I want to use this. I did music clearance before I started working for APM. So, the drill is you go and you say, okay, well, it's for this program, it's going to be distributed here. The usage is an instrumental background for, 1 minute and 32 seconds. And, based on that, you have an internal formula then in terms of what you would expect the publisher's going to charge. It doesn't work that way for a library. So you have to think of the fact that, it is a different business model at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, and but that also is like, it's very critical, like for the industry, like that libraries like exist and that they work that way, because it just like, it's sort of, it's a puzzle piece that fits, I mean, like if I'm on a Netflix movie, I know that APM has some kind of blanket deal in place with Netflix where I know exactly what the needle drop costs are per queue for this, distributor. And I think, there's even some other incentives like where it's like, oh, you use X amount, and then after that it's like gratis or whatever. I forget how you guys do it, but
it's probably, well, it would never be gratis, number one, because
Never gratis.
never gratis.
but like you spend a certain
Never-
amount,
because,
right?
Well,
And then
what you might do is you might have what they call a production blanket,
Yeah.
which means that for a set license fee, the production is allowed to use an unlimited amount of music, as opposed to doing what we call a needle drop, where you pay a set fee for each individual use. The other thing is if you're doing a ton of production, it might be the kind of thing where you're anticipating doing a bunch of different shows, and we'll say, okay, well, here's the fee if you're going to do 10 shows. If it turns out that you're going to end up doing 20 shows, maybe on the second 10, we'll give you a price break. So it's that sort of a thing, sort of what you call a stepped licensing deal. So I think that's more what
yeah,
you're
it's like,
referring to.
I know if I use a certain amount of like APM cues in this production and I hit like a ceiling, and then after that it's, but obviously that all gets like distributed back through how many cues you're using. But I'm saying, like, when I do my music budget, I have to prioritize everything from the top down, not the bottom up. So like on the last movie, I mean, I spent about $1 million on music licensing. I think there's like 35 songs or cues, 35 pieces of music that were licensed into that, and I would say half of that $1 million went to like 4 songs, So
That figures.
So the rest. So when you take that off the top, realizing like expensive music is expensive, and where and why expensive songs might become more expensive depending on their context. It's like if you've got 2 end title songs, suddenly that's going to really change your budget dynamics, because everything's double or tripled for a famous song in a title sequence. So you really have to. You're like taking large swaths out of the budget for these big moments where you're prioritizing music and artists and songs, and then you've got a lot left. You've got, okay, I have 20 more needle drop spots or something like that in this film, and I've got X amount left, and so then you're like, well, where's the other? I'm going to use try to fill as many of these blanks here, these like sort of background low priority spots with production music, because I know that like that's going to cost this, and so I can take that out. Now I've got this much left to play with for these like 10 scenes where I want to go find cool independent indie music that's got a little bit of buzz on it, that's you may have heard somewhere before. They might even be a band that you like that you've gone to see at the Troubadour or whatever. And then I'm going out to the Greater Goods and Terror Bird and Low Profile and Penn and places like that, and being like, okay, we're looking at like $5,000 a drop, $10,000 a drop, like, somewhere in that space, then I have a certain amount that I can spend like that. And then always unexpected stuff comes up, and maybe you've got a contingency budget, and then maybe you're limping towards the end and your budget's on fumes, and then you got to beg for deals with somebody and be like, that always happens at some point, and you just got to deal with it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we wanted to just ask you really quickly, words of advice. We know for us, networking was a big part of it, coming to PMC, and I know the Guild of Music Conference, Supervisors Conference is coming up October 1st. Put that on your calendar if you can make it. Of course, Michael and David are very active with CCC. It's a California Copyright Conference organization, and Michael has been past president of the Association of Independent Music Publishers, and they are doing a toolbox a week from today, Thursday all day, and check it out. It's free. It's a really great place to meet people like this. You never know who's going to show up. So party words of advice really quick. What would you say to composers to get their music to you or to places that do sync?
And you're looking at me,
Really
so
quick,
I think I'm
Michael.
going first. Do your research. Find out who somebody is, what they already represent. You know, even with the mics of the world, what are they working on? The biggest mistake you can make with him is to email him and ask him what he's working on. Because then he knows you didn't do your work. So do your research and kind of present yourself as if you're solving someone's problem that you perceive that they have.
I'm going to go next because you stole my answer. I don't want her stealing my next answer. So I would say, to elaborate on Michael, I would say also when you figure out which lane you want to drive in, whether it's the indie publisher or a library or sync agency, once you figure that out, also do your homework. Figure out if you're the right match for any one of us, whether it's Penn or APM or the Greater Goods or any of the other agencies or publishers or libraries, because they each have a different flavor too. So make sure you do the homework, because when you approach those people, you want to make sure that you're on brand too.
David copied off my paper. And actually, I have to agree with both Michael and David in that, yes, do your homework. The other thing I would add to that is have a clear sense of what your brand is. You know, if you don't know who you are and if you don't know what it is you do and what you stand for, I, as a library, am going to have a very difficult idea of what you do and how I can pitch your music. And understand that, you know, especially with a really large library like APM, we have a ton of stuff. So understand where you might best fit, whether it be a library the size of APM or a smaller organization. Understand where you might fit and what you can bring to them. Not just what they can do for you in terms of pitching your music, but how can you supplement what they have? How can you complement what they have? Get familiar with what do they already represent? Is this something where I bring something completely different to the table that they could use? Or is this something where it's obvious that they could use more of it because they're deficient in that in their particular library? So again, to echo what both Michael and David said, do your homework, understand the universe that you're wanting to play in, and understand, you know, where you best fit into that universe.
So, Mike, do you want to just accuse them of copying off your paper?
Yeah.
Or do you have your own fresh
They
advice?
said it. I mean, yeah, I agree that, like, if you are an independent artist and you are going to just, like, cold email a music supervisor, then yes, I think it's really important to just really have a clear, like, sound and say what it is. Like, this is what I do. It's not very helpful if you're like, I do it all. I'm a Swiss Army knife musical. I could do what do you need? Like, that's not useful for me. But then backing up a few steps, it's probably just better to, like, get somebody else to send that email anyway. Like, have your music being pitched. Make that a priority, because then you can spend more time making music and not trying to contact every music supervisor in the industry, because that's a job somebody else gets paid to do. You know. And then as far as, like, knowing what people are working on, I think that's great if you can. But I will give it to you that it can be very, very difficult to find that stuff out, especially in the film world. Like, if I'm on a series that's been, going season after season, it can be a bit more predictable. If I'm not on a series and I'm doing film stuff, sometimes my credits don't go up until after I'm done, and there's not really always a way to know what I'm working on. But that's another reason to have somebody pitching your music, because, like, I have relationships with those people, and it's just easier for them to get it to me than you.
Great. Well, please help me in giving them a big hand for Mike Turner, David Kwan, Edwina, Travis Chen, and Michael Haynes. Thank you.